is Rebecca Fraimow. I am currently the steering committee chair of the PB Core Public Broadcasting Metadata Dictionary Project. Just briefly to talk a little bit about myself, I work at WGBH, which is the public broadcasting station in Boston. And I also work on the American Archive of Public Broadcasting project, which I'm going to talk about a little more as it's relevant to PB Core. So PB Core is a metadata standard, which was originally funded in 2005 by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting in the United States to provide a way for metadata exchange among the public broadcasting television stations. So they provided the initial funding, but over the course of time, it became clear that PB Core was not only being adopted by public broadcasting stations, but was becoming very widely adopted in the archival community, and specifically among moving image archivists, people who, in the library and archives world, who were having to deal with media coming in that, kind of existing library standards didn't really have a good way to describe or qualify. So the AMIA, the Association of Moving Image Archivists, also became very heavily involved in discussions around the standardization of PB Core. In 2013, CPB founded the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, which is one of the major projects I work on. It's a partnership between WGBH and the Library of Congress to try and preserve public broadcasting content from all over the United States. So we work with hundreds of public broadcasting stations in just almost every state. We don't have everyone yet. To try and assist them with digitizing their older content, putting good systems in place for tracking and managing their newer content, and making it as much of it as we can available through our site, the American Archive, for viewing and research purposes. So along with responsibility for the American Archive project, CPB transferred to us responsibility for the PB Core metadata standard, and so we've been sort of managing it ever since. The last major update to PB Core was a couple of years ago. When responsibility transferred to WGBH, we decided in the American Archive, one of our projects was to kind of revitalize the standard. Since it hadn't undergone a major update in some time, usage had sort of fallen off, and we wanted to get back in touch with our users and figure out what they really wanted and how we could make it more useful to them. So in the 2 years since we've started actively working on it, we've introduced a revised standard, PB Core 2.1, and we've been working on updating our controlled vocabularies, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and forming more partnerships to try and figure out how this standard can most be of use among all the other standards out there. I don't know if I should answer questions now, or...
It's not a question. I think you are talking too fast.
Oh, sorry, I'll try and slow down.
We are not on the clock, so...
Apologies, I'll try and slow down. And again, I too have also got a little bit of a cold, so if I sound stuffy or stumble, I apologize for that too. So our usage of PB Core, as I said, is really designed for, is targeted towards public broadcasting communities and has become adopted by moving image archivists communities as well. And because many of those communities don't have funds or resources for a lot of the tools that kind of bigger broadcasting agencies have, and many of them do not have as much technological savvy within their institutions, we really want to make sure we're making it accessible to kind of lower resourced organizations out there so that they can start at least cataloging according to some standard. So this is from our website. We describe PB Core as a guideline for cataloging or describing content, a model for building custom databases, a guideline for identifying a set of vocabularies, a data model, a guideline for creating spreadsheets, and an exchange mechanism between applications. So we really want to make it clear to our users that you don't have to be a technical wizard in order to adopt PB Core. As long as you're using the basic concepts in order to make it exchangeable, it can be accessible even if you don't understand XML. So the basic concept behind PB Core is it's broken down into a couple of levels. This is a visualization of our data model. So the two main levels of PB Core are asset and instantiation. And this speaks a little bit to, there was a question earlier about versioning in media assets. Way back when PB Core was developed in the early 2000s, material was still being, at least in the States among the public broadcasting community, still largely being transferred on tape between, from station to station. And you'd have multiple versions of an asset on different kinds of tape. And what we decided at the time that the standard was developed is that we wanted a way to link numerous instantiations, so individual versions of an asset, with the same intellectual content. So the way that PB Core is structured is that it's a nested structure, and you can attach a number, any amount of intellectual content, quote, asset level metadata, and link it to a number of different instantiations or versions of that same intellectual content. So you can record it as an asset and then say, we have a tape and we have a file and we have another file that's packaged out for international use and another file for YouTube. And all of those are one asset in different instantiations of the asset. To talk a little bit more about the kind of data that PB Core captures, so it's intellectual content, which is the kind of thing that we've been discussing as far as subjects and titles and the kind of thing that would attach to an asset rather than instantiation. Intellectual property, we consider anything that has to do with creators and contributors as well as rights to be intellectual property. Instantiation level metadata is anything that would attach to one specific version of that intellectual property rather than the intellectual property as a whole. And then extension elements are something that allows us to import information from other standards if people don't want to map it, but if there's another standard that provides the ability to have more comprehensive technical metadata or more comprehensive content metadata than PB Core allows, you can wrap it in an extension and just kind of import it into a document, which is maybe not the most elegant way to do it, but we're aware that we can't be all things to all people. And so this is one simple way to kind of allow for that additional metadata that we don't support. So in addition to being a nested structure allowing for assets and instantiations, PB Core also, within the XML, makes heavy use of attributes. So what we're trying to encourage our users to do, if they have the capacity, is to source as much information as possible that they're using from a controlled vocabulary or from some external source that they can refer to and that can be a constant reference. So to that end, all of our elements have the ability to attach a source, a reference, a version, and annotation information to allow for more rich metadata if you want to do so. Now, within a newsroom, that's a lot of time to take to, within a broadcast organization, that's a lot of time to take for, each individual element. But within an archival context, our users do find it useful to be able to apply that additional metadata. So we allow for that possibility. In some cases, this makes for kind of an unwieldy number of attributes on an element. The total page number of attributes that apply to PB Core title, our basic element here, don't fit on this slide. But in this case, title can have a title type as an attribute, and then because there's a controlled vocabulary for a type of title, whether that's the title of a clip or a segment or a series or whatever it is, there's a controlled vocabulary for that. So then you have the ability to have a title type source. So you can say, well, the source for this title type is a controlled vocabulary X, which, again, can get unwieldy sort of fast. So this is maybe not the ideal way to do it, but at least it allows for a way to store that information. So I mentioned controlled vocabularies. PB Core does have controlled vocabularies associated with it. These were last updated in 2011. So those controlled vocabularies are hosted on the Open Metadata Registry, but currently those controlled vocabularies, last updated in 2011, they don't have definitions listed, and they don't link out to anything that actually resolves back, as a URI to a site. So one of our most important initiatives over the past year, since responsibility for PB Core came to us, has been to develop much more extensive controlled vocabularies for terminology that's used within PB Core. We've just finished a round of revisions on these and have just released them to the PB Core user community. And the PB Core user community, as I've mentioned, consists of a mix of public broadcasters who are using PB Core and moving image archivists who are interested in that amount of metadata for archival purposes. So working group has been working on developing improved controlled vocabularies, and we're just about ready to release them within the next 2 weeks. So we'll welcome comments and thoughts once we do. One important note about our controlled vocabularies is that with these, because we're revising them, we have the opportunity to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel with our controlled vocabularies and that we're not overlapping with work that's already been done. So for example, IPTC has a number of fantastic controlled vocabularies for news terminology. And in those cases, we're like, well, we can just link to IPTC. We don't need to generate our own controlled vocabularies. But in other cases, for example, we looked and we didn't see that there was a fantastic singular list out there of controlled vocabularies for these older video terms for older formats. So we've been compiling that. We didn't see that there was necessarily a one single list out there for terms such as the roles that contributors and creators play in creating a moving image, in creating a video or some kind of moving image work. So we've developed a controlled vocabulary for that and so on. So you'll be able to see all of these soon. Another thing I want to mention is that we have been partnering with EBU Core over the past 2 years. So we had a very serious discussion when responsibility for PB Core came to us, and we said there are a number of other video metadata standards out there, EBU Core being one of the most prominent ones. Is it really valuable for us to continue supporting this standard, which is in use among our user community, but is not widely adopted outside of it, and does overlap in a number of places with these other existing standards? So we went to our user community and we went to EBU Core and we started discussions. And we thought, well, would it make sense for us just to merge with EBU Core and make sure that they can cover all of the things that we need to cover as, the few things that we cover that they don't? And in the end, after discussing with our user community, what we decided was that there was enough support and enough people kind of at the ground level using PB Core, especially at the most basic level, then it made sense to keep supporting it as a data model, as an XML standard, for those who weren't ready to kind of take the step to linked data, which is what EBU Core is kind of primarily focusing on now, linked data and the semantic web. But we do want to make sure for those users who are moving towards linked data and the semantic web that they have a roadmap with which to do so. So we decided not to create our own PB Core linked data semantic application, but instead to focus on a mapping to EBU Core that could be used in linked applications such as Fedora, which is broadly used in the open source library community, and create a roadmap for that kind of transition forward. So we've been working with EBU Core on this, and we've been working with them to make sure that where there weren't easy mappings, we can create mappings from our properties that do exist in our standard that don't exist in theirs. And you can see in the most recent update of EBU Core, I think my name is on that list about 3/4 of the way down, a number of WGBH contributors, because we all provided thoughts about properties and ways that EBU Core could add to make that mapping easier. So we're continuing that work. I will say that since the American Archive of Public Broadcasting project began, usage of PB Core has also increased, and it's not just because of our fantastic work marketing the standard, because I wouldn't exactly say it's been fantastic marketing-wise. We're all juggling a number of hats. But the fact that there is now a central location that's working to collect metadata from smaller public broadcasting organizations that maybe didn't have a metadata standard in place before and hadn't been capturing their metadata in any kind of standardized way, it makes it kind of a no-brainer for them when they're thinking about how to start structuring their data, because they might want to give it to the American Archive eventually. It provides an impetus for them to go to that standard as opposed to one of the others that are available. So it has become, made sort of a community aspect to that, the existence of the AAPB. And that's about it. I'll keep it short for now, and if you guys have any questions, you can ask at the end of the session. If you want to know more about PB Core, you can go to our website or follow us on Twitter at @TheRealPBCore. There is actually a fake PB Core Twitter account that someone created. I don't know why. Or you can contact me at the email up there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rebecca.